The distant howl of wolves carried on the frigid Wyoming wind as Zara Mitchell huddled closer to the dying embers, her thin cotton dress offering little protection against the biting December chill of 1875. She had lost everything: her wagon, her supplies, her horse, all gone in the flash flood that had swept through the narrow canyon just hours before. As darkness fell across the wilderness, she knew she wouldn't survive the night without help. Zara's fingers trembled as she fed the last of her gathered twigs into the struggling fire. The orange glow illuminated her face, highlighting the determination in her eyes despite her desperate situation. She had come west to start anew after her parents' passing, left her with nothing but debts and painful memories in Philadelphia. Now she wondered if she would ever see the morning light. The snap of a twig in the darkness made her freeze. Her hand instinctively moved to the small knife tucked in her boot, the only possession she'd managed to keep. "Hello there," a deep voice called from beyond the firelight. "Mind if I join you?" A tall figure emerged from the shadows, leading a chestnut mare. His face was partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, but Zara could make out the strong line of his jaw, covered in several days' worth of stubble. "Who are you?" she demanded, knife now firmly in her grip, though concealed in the folds of her dress. "Xavier Irwin," he answered, stopping a respectful distance from her small camp. "I was tracking some Mustangs when I spotted your fire. You're a fair ways from anywhere, miss." Zara assessed him quickly. His worn denim pants and checkered shirt spoke of hard work, while the revolver holstered at his hip suggested he knew how to handle trouble. But it was his eyes kind despite their wariness that made her lower her guard slightly. "I'm Zara Mitchell," she replied, her teeth chattering between words. "My wagon was lost in Blackwater Canyon during the flood." Xavier's expression softened. "That's a hard stroke of luck. You're shaking something fierce." Before she could respond, he shrugged off his heavy leather coat and stepped forward, draping it gently around her shoulders. The sudden warmth and the lingering scent of leather, horse, and pine enveloped her. "Thank you," she whispered, pulling the coat tighter. "Can't have you freezing to death out here," he said matter-of-factly. "My ranch is about 4 miles north. If you're willing to trust a stranger, I can offer you shelter for the night. My housekeeper, Mrs. Caldwell, is there proper as they come, so your reputation would be safe." Zara hesitated. She had learned to be cautious of men's offers, especially in the untamed territories. But the alternative was a night in the open, with temperatures dropping and predators prowling. "I would be grateful for shelter," she finally said. Xavier nodded, then busied himself building up her fire. "We'll rest here a bit, get you warmed up before the ride. Storm's coming in from the mountains. We need to reach Ironwood Ranch before it hits." As Xavier worked, Zara studied him. His movements were efficient, practiced. He wasn't young, perhaps 30 or so, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested both laughter and hardship. "What brings a woman alone to Wyoming territory?" he asked, settling across from her. "A teaching position in Silverton," she replied. "Or, at least, that was the plan." Xavier raised an eyebrow. "Silverton's still another 2 days' ride. School term must have started by now." "It has," Zara admitted, her heart sinking. "I was delayed in Cheyenne, waiting for a wagon train with sufficient protection. Bandits have been active on the trail." "And now you've lost everything," Xavier observed. Zara straightened her spine. "Not everything, Mr. Irwin. I still have my determination and my education. The position may be lost, but I'll find another." A smile tugged at the corner of Xavier's mouth. "I don't doubt that for a second, Miss Mitchell." They sat in companionable silence as the fire crackled between them, Xavier occasionally adding branches to keep the flames fed. When he deemed Zara sufficiently warmed, he extinguished the fire with practiced care. "Ready to ride?" he asked, extending a hand to help her up. Zara accepted his assistance, surprised by the gentle strength in his calloused grip. Xavier led her to his horse, a magnificent mare with intelligent eyes. "This is Penny," he said, patting the horse's neck. "She's sturdy enough to carry us both." With surprising grace, Xavier mounted first, then reached down for Zara. She hesitated only briefly before allowing him to pull her up behind him. The intimacy of the position her chest pressed against his back, arms around his waist, made her cheeks flush despite the cold. "Hold tight," he instructed, and Zara complied as Penny began moving through the darkness. The ride was uncomfortable, each step of the horse jostling Zara's already aching body. Xavier seemed to sense her discomfort and slowed Penny's pace whenever possible. As they rode, he pointed out landmarks barely visible in the moonlight, perhaps to distract her from the pain. "There's Widow's Peak," he said, gesturing to a jagged mountain silhouette. "Local legend says a woman waited there 7 years for her husband to return from the gold fields. Some folks claim they can still see her standing there on foggy nights." "And did he return, I mean?" Zara asked. Xavier was quiet for a moment. "Some stories don't have happy endings out here. That's why the ones that do matter all the more." The first fat snowflakes began to fall as a sprawling ranch house came into view. Lights glowed warmly from several windows, and smoke curled from the chimney. The sight nearly brought tears to Zara's eyes. Safety, at last. As they approached, a lantern appeared on the porch, held high by a stout woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun. "Xavier Irwin, I was about to send the hands out looking for you," the woman called, her stern expression softening when she spotted Zara. "And who have we here?" "Mrs. Caldwell." "This is Miss Mitchell," Xavier explained as he dismounted and helped Zara down. "She lost her wagon in the flood. She needs shelter and whatever kindness we can provide." Mrs. Caldwell's assessment was quick and thorough. "Poor thing's half frozen. Come inside, child. A hot meal and warm bath will set you right." Zara found herself ushered into a spacious, rustic home. The main room was dominated by a massive stone fireplace where a fire roared, throwing heat and light across polished wooden floors and simple, sturdy furniture. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and warm, a haven from the wilderness outside. "Joe," Xavier called, and a young ranch hand appeared from what Zara assumed was the kitchen. "Take care of Penny, would you? And tell the boys about Miss Mitchell's wagon. First light tomorrow, I want a party checking Blackwater Canyon for any of her belongings that might have survived." The young man nodded and disappeared into the snowy night. Mrs. Caldwell guided Zara to a chair by the fire. "You sit right there while I heat some stew and prepare a bath. Those wet clothes will be the death of you." Left alone with Xavier, Zara suddenly felt self-conscious. His coat still draped around her shoulders seemed to emphasize her vulnerability. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm not sure what would have happened if you hadn't found me." Xavier shook his head. "No need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same." "We both know that's not true," Zara replied. "There are plenty who would have taken advantage of a woman alone." A shadow crossed his face. "There are, but not here, not on my land." He cleared his throat. "You're welcome to stay until you've recovered and made plans. The nearest town is Riverend, about a day's ride from here. They might need a teacher." Hope fluttered in Zara's chest. "Really?" Xavier nodded. "Small place, but growing. They've been trying to establish a proper school for over a year now." Before they could discuss further, Mrs. Caldwell returned with a steaming bowl of stew and thick slices of bread. The aroma made Zara's stomach growl embarrassingly loud. "Eat up," Mrs. Caldwell instructed. "Then it's a hot bath and bed for you. Tomorrow's soon enough for decisions and discussions." Zara ate gratefully while Xavier excused himself to check on his ranch hands. By the time Mrs. Caldwell led her to a small but comfortable bedroom with an adjoining bathing room, exhaustion was overtaking her. The hot bath was blissful, easing her aching muscles and washing away the grime of her ordeal. Clean, warm, and dressed in a borrowed nightgown, Zara slipped between fresh sheets. As sleep claimed her, she thought of Xavier's kind eyes and the way his coat had smelled of pine and open skies. For the first time since her parents' deaths, she felt safe. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through lace curtains. For a moment, Zara was disoriented, the unfamiliar room confusing her sleep-addled mind. Then memories of the previous day flooded back the flood, the freezing night, Xavier finding her. A soft knock preceded Mrs. Caldwell's entrance, carrying a tray with breakfast and a simple but clean dress. "Good morning, Miss Mitchell. I trust you slept well?" "Better than I have in months," Zara admitted, sitting up. "Is that dress for me?" Mrs. Caldwell nodded. "It belonged to Xavier's sister. She lives in Denver now with her husband and rarely visits. She's closer to your size than I am." "That's very kind. Please thank Mr. Irwin for me. You can thank him yourself. He's waiting to speak with you once you're dressed and fed. Curious, Zara ate quickly and donned the offered dress. It was a simple blue cotton garment, well made, but not fancy. It fit reasonably well, though it was a bit loose in the bodice. She did her best with her hair, using the small mirror on the dresser to fashion it into a presentable bun. Xavier was in the main room, studying papers at a large desk. He rose when she entered, and Zara was struck again by his height and the quiet strength he exuded. "Miss Mitchell, you look much improved this morning," he said, his voice warm. "Thanks to your hospitality," she replied. "I cannot express my gratitude enough." Xavier gestured for her to sit in one of the chairs by the now banked fire. "I've had news from my men. They found some of your belongings washed up along the creek bed. Not much, I'm afraid. A trunk, badly damaged but still closed, and some books." Zara's heart leapt. "My books? They survived?" Xavier nodded. "Most were waterlogged, but we've got them drying. The trunk contains some clothing, also wet but salvageable. Mrs. Caldwell has taken charge of those." "That's wonderful news," Zara said, relief evident in her voice. Those books represented her most valuable possessions, not in monetary terms, but as the tools of her trade and links to her former life. "There's more," Xavier continued, a certain hesitancy in his tone. "I sent word to Riverend about your situation. It seems they're indeed in need of a teacher. Their last one left rather suddenly last month. If you're interested, they'd like to meet with you." Zara felt hope rising within her. "That would be perfect, actually." "It's a small town," Xavier cautioned. "Nothing like Philadelphia, I imagine. The pay would be modest." "I'm not afraid of modest or small," Zara assured him. "After what happened yesterday, I'm simply grateful for any opportunity." Xavier studied her for a moment, as if assessing her sincerity. "Very well. I can take you to Riverend in a few days, once the weather clears and you've had time to recover." "Thank you. But I wouldn't want to impose further." Xavier held up a hand. "It's no imposition. I have business there anyway." His expression softened slightly. "Besides, I'd feel better knowing you arrived safely." Something in his tone made Zara look at him more closely. There was genuine concern there, and perhaps something more. She felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with her recent ordeal. "Then I accept your escort, Mr. Irwin." "Xavier, please," he said. "If we're to be neighbors of sorts, we might as well use our given names." "Zara, then," she replied with a small smile. The next few days passed in a pleasant routine. As her strength returned, Zara insisted on helping Mrs. Caldwell with household tasks. The older woman was initially reluctant, but soon appreciated Zara's capable assistance. They developed a comfortable rapport, with Mrs. Caldwell sharing stories of the ranch's early days, and Zara recounting tales of her teaching experiences back east. Xavier was often absent during daylight hours, attending to ranch business, but joined them for evening meals. Zara learned he had built Ironwood Ranch from nearly nothing after coming west following the war between the states. He spoke little of his past before Wyoming, and Zara sensed there were wounds there best left undisturbed. On the third evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Xavier brought out a map of the region. "The storm's passed, and the trail should be passable tomorrow," he said, spreading the map on the table between them. "We'll leave after breakfast for Riverend. It's about 6 hours' ride, so we'll arrive before sundown." Zara studied the map, noting the distance between the ranch and the town. "It seems I'll be quite isolated once I'm settled there." Xavier's fingers traced the trail connecting their locations. "Not so far as the crow flies. Besides, I make the trip regularly for supplies and to sell livestock. Riverend's the closest trading post to Ironwood." The thought was oddly comforting. "Then perhaps I'll see you from time to time." "I expect you will," Xavier replied, his eyes meeting hers briefly before returning to the map. "The town council meets here." He pointed to a building marked on a rough sketch of Riverend. "That's where you'll interview. I know most of the members good people, if a bit set in their ways." As Xavier detailed what she might expect, Zara found herself watching his hands, strong, capable hands that had built this ranch. That had offered her his coat in her moment of need. She quickly redirected her thoughts. It wouldn't do to develop an attachment to this man, no matter how kind he'd been. Her focus needed to be on securing the teaching position and establishing herself independently. Morning brought clear skies and milder temperatures. Mrs. Caldwell had packed provisions for their journey and freshly laundered the clothes recovered from Zara's trunk. Xavier had arranged for her to ride a gentle mare named Daisy, as Penny would be carrying supplies. "She's even tempered," Xavier assured her as he helped adjust the stirrups. "Just keep a firm hand on the reins, and she'll follow my lead." Zara settled into the saddle, grateful for the riding lessons her father had insisted upon years ago. "She's lovely. Thank you for trusting me with her." "Daisy's a good judge of character," Xavier replied with a small smile. "She wouldn't let you mount if she didn't approve." They set off as the sun cleared the eastern mountains, casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape. The air was crisp and clean, the sky an impossible blue. Despite the circumstances that had brought her here, Zara couldn't help but appreciate the wild beauty surrounding them. Xavier proved to be a knowledgeable guide, pointing out landmarks and sharing the history of the region. He spoke of the indigenous peoples who had first inhabited these lands, the trappers and mountain men who followed, and finally the ranchers and settlers who were slowly transforming the territory. "My father would have loved this," Zara commented as they paused to rest the horses near a spectacular overlook. He was a history professor with an insatiable curiosity about the American frontier. He collected maps and journals from explorers, dreaming of seeing these places himself. "But he never did?" Xavier asked, offering her a canteen of water. Zara shook her head. "No, he and my mother both died of influenza 2 winters ago. I think that's partly why I decided to come west to see what he never could." "I'm sorry for your loss," Xavier said quietly. "It's not easy, losing parents." Something in his tone suggested personal experience. "You lost yours young?" Xavier nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "Mother when I was 8, father when I was 16. Had to make my own way after that." "Is that when you came west?" "No, that came later, after the war." His expression closed slightly, and Zara didn't press further. They continued their journey, the conversation turning to lighter topics. Xavier spoke of his ranch, his plans for expanding his herds, and the challenges of Wyoming winters. Zara shared stories of her teaching experiences and her hopes for establishing a proper school in Riverend. As the sun began its westward descent, the first buildings of the town appeared on the horizon. Riverend was larger than Zara had expected, perhaps 40 structures arranged along a main street with smaller lanes branching off. There was a general store, a saloon, a small church, and various other businesses that constituted the commercial heart of the community. People stopped to watch as they rode down the main street, curious about the newcomer accompanying Xavier Irwin. Zara felt their stares but held her head high, determined to make a good first impression. Xavier led them to a modest building, with a sign identifying it as the River End Hotel. "Best accommodations in town," he said with a slight smile, dismounting and coming to help her down. "Which isn't saying much, but Mrs. Turner keeps it clean and serves a decent meal." As if summoned by her name, a plump woman with kind eyes emerged from the hotel. "Xavier Irwin, as I live and breathe. Didn't expect to see you until the spring cattle drive." "Special circumstances, Mrs. Turner," Xavier replied, gesturing to Zara. "This is Miss Mitchell. She's here about the teaching position. She'll need a room for tonight, possibly longer, depending on how things go with the council." Mrs. Turner's face lit up. "A teacher! Praise the Lord! The children have been running wild since Mr. Collins left. Come in, come in. I've got a lovely room facing the street. Gets the morning sun." Zara followed the chattering woman into the hotel, glancing back to see Xavier leading the horses toward what appeared to be a livery stable. Mrs. Turner showed her to a small but clean room on the second floor, furnished with a narrow bed, a washstand, a chair, and a small dresser. "Supper's at 6, Mrs. Turner informed her. "The council usually meets at 7 in the town hall. I'll have my boy Toby show you there." Left alone, Zara unpacked her meager belongings and freshened up as best she could. She changed into her one good dress, a dark green wool that had fortunately survived the flood, relatively unscathed. With careful attention, she arranged her hair and pinched her cheeks for color. First impressions mattered, especially when seeking employment. A knock at her door announced Xavier's return. When she opened it, She found him similarly refreshed, his hair damp from washing and his trail dust gone. "I've arranged for you to meet the council after supper," he said, his eyes quickly taking in her appearance. "You look very professional." "Thank you," Zara replied, unsure why his hesitation made her heart beat faster. "I want them to see I take this opportunity seriously." "They'll be impressed," Xavier assured her. "Ready for supper? Mrs. Turner's beef stew is renowned in these parts." The hotel's dining room was simple but welcoming, with oil lamps casting a warm glow over the half-dozen tables. Several were occupied by what appeared to be traveling salesmen and local residents. Their entrance drew curious glances, and Xavier nodded to several people in greeting. A tall, distinguished-looking man with silver at his temples approached their table as they were seated. "Xavier, good to see you. Didn't expect you in town until spring." "Judge Porter." Xavier stood to shake the man's hand. "I'd like you to meet Miss Zara Mitchell. She's here about the teaching position." The judge's eyebrows rose with interest. "Is that so? A fortuitous coincidence?" "We were just discussing the school situation at our last council meeting." "Not coincidence," Xavier explained. "I sent word ahead. Miss Mitchell lost her wagon in the flood at Blackwater Canyon. She was headed to Silverton for a teaching post there." "Terrible business, that flood," Judge Porter said, turning sympathetic eyes to Zara. "2 freight wagons lost as well. You were fortunate to escape with your life, Miss Mitchell." "Indeed I was," Zara agreed, "and doubly fortunate that Mr. Irwin found me." The judge's gaze flickered between them, assessing. "Well, their loss may be our gain. We're in desperate need of someone to educate our young ones. I look forward to our discussion later this evening." As the judge returned to his table, Zara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "He seems formidable," Xavier chuckled. "Judge Porter likes to give that impression, but he's fair-minded. He has 2 grandchildren of school age, so he has personal interest in finding a good teacher." Their meal arrived hearty beef stew with fresh bread, and conversation lapsed as they ate. Zara was surprised by how comfortable she felt in Xavier's company. For a man of few words, he had a knack for making her feel at ease. As they finished eating, a boy of about 12 approached their table. "Mr. Irwin, madam, I'm Toby. Ma sent me to show you to the town hall when you're ready." "Thank you, Toby," Zara replied with a smile. "We'll be right along." Outside, the temperature had dropped with the sun, and Zara was grateful for the warm shawl Mrs. Caldwell had insisted she take. Toby led them down the main street to a 2-story building with a small bell tower. Light glowed from its windows, and the murmur of voices could be heard from within. "The council's already gathered," Xavier observed. "Remember, speak clearly about your qualifications and experience." These are practical people. They value education, but also want someone who can handle the realities of frontier teaching. Zara nodded, suddenly nervous. "Will you come in with me?" Xavier hesitated. "It might be better if you face them alone. I don't want them thinking I'm trying to influence their decision." "Of course," Zara said, though disappointment flared. "That makes sense. I'll wait for you," Xavier promised. "Right here." Drawing a deep breath, Zara squared her shoulders and followed Toby into the town hall. The main room was arranged with benches facing a raised platform, where 5 people sat at a long table, 4 men and 1 woman. Judge Porter occupied the center position. "Ah, Miss Mitchell," he said, gesturing her forward. "Please, join us." The next hour was a thorough examination of Zara's qualifications, teaching philosophy, and personal background. The council members asked pointed questions about her experience, her reasons for coming west, and her ability to manage a school with children of various ages and abilities. "Our previous teacher left because he found the conditions too primitive," the woman, introduced as Mrs. Harrington, explained. "We need someone who won't abandon these children at the first hardship." "I understand," Zara replied earnestly. "I came west knowing it would be challenging. I'm prepared for those challenges." Judge Porter leaned forward. "And what of your future plans, Miss Mitchell? Many young women come west seeking husbands. Would marriage mean the end of your teaching career?" Zara felt heat rise to her cheeks, but met his gaze steadily. "My primary commitment would be to my students. While I don't dismiss the possibility of marriage someday, I'm here first and foremost as a teacher. This seemed to satisfy the council. After a few more questions, they asked her to wait outside while they deliberated. Zara found Xavier pacing on the boardwalk, his breath visible in the cold air. "How did it go?" he asked immediately. "I think well," Zara replied. They were thorough but fair in their questioning. Xavier nodded. "That's a good sign. Judge Porter doesn't waste time if he's not interested." They waited in companionable silence, watching as the town settled into evening routines. Lamps were lit in windows, and the sounds from the saloon grew more boisterous. Stars appeared in the clear sky, brilliantly visible without the competing lights of a large city. After what seemed an eternity, but was probably only 20 minutes, the door opened and Judge Porter himself appeared. "Miss Mitchell, we've reached a decision," he announced. "The council would like to offer you the position of teacher for River End School, effective immediately. The term would run through June, with consideration for renewal based on performance." Joy and relief flooded through Zara. "I accept, Your Honor. Thank you for this opportunity." "Excellent," the judge said, clearly pleased. "Mrs. Harrington will review the details with you tomorrow: salary, accommodations, and supplies. We can offer the teacher's cottage behind the schoolhouse. It's small but serviceable." "That sounds perfect," Zara assured him. As Judge Porter bid them good night and returned inside, Zara turned to Xavier, unable to contain her excitement. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him in a spontaneous embrace. "I did it!" she exclaimed. Xavier stiffened momentarily in surprise. Then his arms came around her, returning the hug briefly before stepping back. His expression was unreadable in the dim light, but his voice held warmth. "Congratulations, teacher," he said. River End just gained a valuable asset. Suddenly aware of her impropriety, Zara stepped back, smoothing her dress. "I apologize for my enthusiasm. It's just this means everything. A fresh start, exactly what I came west to find." "No need to apologize for joy," Xavier replied. "It's too rare a commodity out here." They walked back to the hotel, discussing the practicalities of her new position. Xavier offered to help her move into the teacher's cottage the next day, and to acquire any necessary supplies from the general store. "You've done so much for me already," Zara protested as they reached the hotel. "Neighbors help neighbors," Xavier said simply. "That's how we survive out here." The word neighbors brought a curious mix of emotions. On one hand, Zara was grateful for his continued support. On the other, there was an unexpected twinge of disappointment at the fraternal tone. "Well, neighbor," she said lightly, "I'm in your debt nonetheless." Xavier tipped his hat slightly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be busy." Zara watched him walk away toward the livery stable where he'd arranged to spend the night. Only when he disappeared from view did she enter the hotel, her mind whirling with plans for her new life. Morning brought a flurry of activity. Mrs. Harrington arrived shortly after breakfast to discuss the details of Zara's position and to show her the school and cottage. The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building with rows of benches, a teacher's desk, a blackboard, and a pot-bellied stove. It was sparsely equipped, but clean and sound. "We have 27 students enrolled, ages 6 to 16, Mrs. Harrington explained. "Attendance is irregular during planting and harvest seasons and in bad weather. The older boys often miss school to help with ranching or farming." Zara nodded, already considering how to structure lessons for such a diverse group. "What about books and supplies?" "Limited," Mrs. Harrington admitted. "We have some readers, arithmetic primers, and a few history and geography texts. Paper and pencils are provided, but used judiciously. Children bring their own slates." The teacher's cottage behind the school was indeed small, just one main room serving as kitchen, dining, and living area, plus a tiny bedroom. A hand pump at the sink provided water, and an outhouse stood a discreet distance behind. It was simple but clean, with basic furnishings including a bed, table, chairs, and a small bookshelf. "It's perfect," Zara declared, already envisioning how she would make it home. Mrs. Harrington seemed pleased. "The last teacher complained constantly about the accommodations. It's refreshing to hear enthusiasm." Xavier arrived as Mrs. Harrington was leaving, bringing Zara's recovered belongings from his saddlebags. "I've arranged with Mr. Thompson at the general store to provide whatever supplies you need to get settled," The council approved a small stipend for initial expenses. Zara was touched by his thoughtfulness. "You've thought of everything." "Not everything," Xavier replied with a slight smile. "But I try to be thorough." They spent the day setting up the cottage, with Xavier fixing a loose shutter and securing a wobbly chair while Zara arranged her few possessions. They worked well together, moving around each other with surprising ease, as if they'd done this many times before. By late afternoon, the cottage felt remarkably like home. A fire crackled in the small stove, a pot of coffee simmered on top, and Zara's books, though, water damage lined the shelf, giving the space a personal touch. "I should head back to Ironwood before dark," Xavier said, reluctance evident in his tone. "The hands will be wondering where I've disappeared to." Zara felt a surprising pang at the thought of his departure. "Of course! You've already done far more than I had any right to expect." Xavier hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "I almost forgot. I brought something for you." He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Curious, Zara unwrapped it to find a beautifully crafted brass bell. "For the school," Xavier explained. "I noticed the old one was cracked. Thought this might help you call your students to order." The thoughtfulness of the gift moved her deeply. "It's perfect. Thank you." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with things unsaid. Finally, Xavier cleared his throat. "I come to town every other Saturday for supplies. Perhaps I could check on how you're settling in." "I'd like that," Zara replied, perhaps too quickly. "I mean, it would be nice to see a familiar face." Xavier nodded, his expression softening. "Until then, teacher." Zara stood in the doorway of her new home, watching as Xavier mounted Penny and rode slowly down the lane. Only when he disappeared from view did she close the door, feeling strangely bereft, despite the excitement of her new beginning. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Zara met her students, established routines, and began the challenging work of educating children of vastly different ages and abilities. Some had never attended school before. Others had received sporadic instruction from previous teachers. All were curious about their new teacher from back east. The community proved welcoming, if reserved. Parents brought eggs, preserves, and occasionally fresh meat to supplement her modest salary. Mrs. Turner invited her to Sunday dinners at the hotel. Judge Porter loaned her books from his personal library. Slowly, Zara began to feel part of Riverend. Yet she found herself watching the trail from Ironwood Ranch with increasing frequency as Saturday approached. She told herself it was natural to look forward to seeing the one person who connected her to her dramatic arrival in Wyoming. There was nothing more to it than that. Saturday dawned clear and cold. Zara rose early, tidied her cottage with perhaps more care than usual, and baked fresh bread, a skill Mrs. Caldwell had insisted on teaching her during her brief stay at Ironwood. By mid-morning, she had given up pretending not to watch for Xavier and had positioned herself at the small table by the window, ostensibly grading arithmetic exercises. The sight of a familiar figure on horseback coming down the main street made her heart leap embarrassingly. She forced herself to remain seated, counting slowly to 50 before rising to put on the kettle for coffee. Xavier's knock came just as the water began to boil. Zara opened the door to find him hat in hand, his hair windblown from the ride. "Good morning, teacher," he said, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Zara replied, stepping back to let him enter. "I've just put coffee on, and there's fresh bread if you're hungry after your ride." Xavier inhaled appreciatively. "Smells wonderful. Mrs. Caldwell would be proud of her student." The easy domesticity of sharing coffee and bread at her small table felt both novel and strangely familiar. Xavier spoke of happenings at the ranch, new calves, fence repairs, preparations for spring. Zara shared stories of her students' progress and the challenges of teaching such a diverse group. "Tommy Jenkins finally grasped long division yesterday," she said proudly. "I've never seen a child work so hard at something that didn't come naturally." "The Jenkins are good people," Xavier commented. "Hard workers. Tommy's father breaks horses for me sometimes." "And what about Martha Collins? She mentioned her father works for you occasionally." Xavier nodded. "Liam Collins helps with the spring cattle drive. One of the best hands with a lasso I've ever seen." Their conversation continued, connecting the threads of their separate lives in this small community. Zara realized that through her students, she was learning about the entire region, its families, its economy, its struggles and triumphs. "You seem to be settling in well," Xavier observed as he accepted a second cup of coffee. "The town's talking about you." Zara tensed slightly. "Good things, I hope?" "Very good things," Xavier assured her. "Mrs. Harrington told Judge Porter you're the best teacher they've had in years, and the children are actually attending regularly, which hasn't happened since, well, ever." Relief and pride warmed Zara's cheeks. "I'm trying my best. These children deserve a proper education, no matter where they live." Xavier studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You truly care about them." "Of course I do." "How could I not?" A slow smile spread across Xavier's face, transforming his usually reserved features. "You're a rare woman, Zara Mitchell." The use of her given name, spoken with such warmth, sent a flutter through her chest. "I'm just doing my job," she demurred. "No," Xavier shook his head. "You're doing far more than that. You're giving these children something precious possibility." Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment, Zara couldn't breathe. There was admiration in Xavier's gaze, yes, but something else too. Something that made her pulse quicken and her hands tremble slightly around her coffee cup. The moment broke when the clock on the mantel chimed noon. Xavier glanced at it, then rose reluctantly. "I should get to the general store before Mr. Thompson closes for his midday meal." "Of course," Zara said, standing as well. "Thank you for stopping by." At the door, Xavier hesitated. "The spring dance is next Saturday, a town tradition to welcome the new season. I wondered if, that is, would you consider attending with me?" The invitation caught Zara by surprise. "As neighbors?" she asked, immediately regretting the question when she saw uncertainty flicker across his face. "As whatever you're comfortable with," Xavier replied carefully. "But I'd be honored to escort you." Zara found herself smiling. "Then yes, I'd be delighted to attend with you." The relief and pleasure that crossed Xavier's face made her heart swell. "I'll call for you at 7 then." After he left, Zara stood at the window, watching him stride down the lane toward the general store. Only when he disappeared from view did she allow herself to acknowledge the truth she'd been avoiding. She was developing feelings for Xavier Irwin that went well beyond gratitude or friendship. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. She had come west to establish herself independently, to build a career and a life on her own terms. Romantic entanglements hadn't been part of the plan, yet she couldn't deny the way her heart raced when Xavier was near, or how she counted the days between his visits. The week leading up to the dance passed with excruciating slowness. Zara threw herself into her teaching, staying late to prepare lessons and help struggling students. Her evenings were spent alternating between practical preparations for the dance, pressing her best dress, polishing her shoes, and more fanciful activities, like practicing dance steps she hadn't used since before her parents' deaths. By Saturday, Zara was a bundle of nerves. She dismissed her students at noon, as was customary before town events, then spent the afternoon bathing and preparing with uncharacteristic attention to detail. Her green wool dress, while not fashionable by Eastern standards, was well made and flattering. She arranged her hair in a more elaborate style than usual, securing it with tortoiseshell combs that had belonged to her mother. At precisely 7 o'clock, a knock sounded at her door. Taking a deep breath, Zara opened it to find Xavier standing on her threshold. Looking remarkably different from his usual ranch attire, he wore a dark suit, crisp white shirt, and string tie. His hair was neatly combed, and he'd trimmed his beard. In his hands, he held a small bouquet of early spring wildflowers. "You look beautiful," he said simply, his admiration evident. Zara felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself." Xavier handed her the flowers with a slightly self-conscious smile. "These grow on the south-facing slope at Ironwood, first blooms of the season." The gesture touched her deeply. "They're lovely. Let me put them in water before we go." As she arranged the delicate blossoms in a jar, Zara was aware of Xavier watching her. his gaze warming her more effectively than the fire in the stove. The town hall had been transformed for the dance. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a golden glow over the cleared space. Benches lined the walls, and a small group of musicians tuned their instruments on a raised platform. Nearly everyone in River End and the surrounding homesteads seemed to be in attendance, dressed in their finest clothes and eager for an evening of entertainment after the long winter. Their entrance together caused a subtle ripple of interest. Zara was acutely aware of curious glances and whispered comments. As the town's new teacher, she was already the subject of attention. Arriving on Xavier Irwin's arm elevated that interest considerably. "People are staring," she murmured, as Xavier led her to greet Judge Porter and his wife. "Let them," Xavier replied, his hand warm at the small of her back. "They're just surprised to see me at a social event. I don't attend these gatherings often." "Why not?" Zara asked, genuinely curious. A shadow crossed Xavier's face. "After the war, crowds were difficult for me. Still are. Sometimes." Before Zara could respond, they reached the Porters, and the moment for personal conversation passed. The judge greeted them warmly, introducing his wife and complimenting Zara on her work at the school. Mrs. Porter, a refined woman who had clearly known more sophisticated society before coming west, engaged Zara in conversation about literature, while Xavier spoke with the judge about spring cattle prices. The musicians began playing, and couples moved to the center of the room. Xavier turned to Zara with a questioning look. "Would you care to dance?" "I'd love to," she replied, allowing him to lead her onto the floor. The dance was a simple waltz, but Zara was surprised by Xavier's skill. He moved with unexpected grace for such a tall man, guiding her confidently through the steps. "You dance very well," she commented, looking up at him. A corner of his mouth lifted. "My mother insisted I learn, said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like a wounded buffalo." The image made Zara laugh. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was," Xavier agreed, his expression softening with memory. "Strong, determined, would have thrived out here." As they circled the floor, Zara gradually relaxed into the rhythm and Xavier's sure guidance. The room seemed to fade around them until she was aware only of his hand at her waist, his other hand holding hers, and the warmth in his eyes as he looked down at her. "I've thought about you," Xavier said quietly, his voice nearly lost in the music. "Every day since I left you here." The admission sent a thrill through Zara. "I've thought of you too," she confessed, her voice equally soft. Something shifted in Xavier's expression, hope mingled with caution. "Zara, Whatever he meant to say was interrupted as the music ended, and couples around them applauded. The moment broken, Xavier guided her to the refreshment table where punch and cookies were being served. Throughout the evening, they danced several more times, conversed with townspeople, and enjoyed the simple entertainment. Zara met parents of her students and began to understand more about the community she now called home. Xavier remained attentive, never leaving her side for long, introducing her to ranchers and merchants from outlying areas. As the evening progressed, Zara noticed a gradual change in Xavier. His shoulders tensed, and his responses became more clipped. When a particularly boisterous group began a lively reel, accompanied by stomping feet and clapping hands, he visibly flinched. "Would you like to get some air?" Zara asked quietly, recognizing the signs of distress she'd seen in returning soldiers back east. Gratitude flashed in Xavier's eyes. "If you wouldn't mind." They slipped outside onto the small porch that fronted the town hall. The night air was cold but refreshing after the warm, crowded interior. Stars glittered overhead in a clear sky, and the sounds of the dance were muffled by the closed door. Xavier drew a deep breath, some of the tension leaving his broad shoulders. "I apologize. Sometimes it becomes overwhelming." "There's no need to apologize," Zara assured him, moving to stand beside him at the porch railing. "I understand. Or at least, I try to." They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the occasional late arrival hurry toward the hall or early departure make their way home. "It was Chancellorsville," Xavier said suddenly, his voice low. "That's where it happened. The noise, the chaos. Sometimes I'm back there in an instant. Even now, years later." Zara's heart ached for him. The Battle of Chancellorsville had been one of the bloodiest of the war. "You don't have to explain." "I want to," Xavier replied, turning to face her. "I want you to know. I came west afterward, looking for space, for quiet. Found this valley and knew it was where I needed to be. Building the ranch helped working with my hands, creating something instead of destroying." "You've built something remarkable," Zara said softly. Xavier's expression was vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "Most days I'm at peace with the solitude, but since meeting you, I've started to want more." The confession hung between them, filled with possibility. Zara found herself moving closer, drawn by something deeper than attraction. "I came west seeking independence," she said, "to prove I could stand on my own, but I'm beginning to think true strength might lie in knowing when to stand with someone else." Xavier's hand reached up to gently touch her cheek. "Zara Mitchell, you are the strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever known." The tenderness in his voice undid her. Zara leaned into his touch, and Xavier bent his head, his intention clear. Their lips met in a gentle kiss that quickly deepened, expressing the feelings that had been building since that cold night by the fire. When they finally parted, Zara was breathless. Xavier's arms remained around her, holding her close, as if afraid she might disappear. "I never expected to find you," he murmured against her hair. "Never thought I'd feel this way again, or at all." "Nor I," Zara admitted. "But here we are." The door to the town hall opened, spilling light and music into the night. They stepped apart, though Xavier kept hold of her hand as Judge Porter emerged. "Ah, there you are," the judge said, his knowing smile suggesting he wasn't entirely surprised to find them alone on the porch. "The last dance is about to begin." Xavier looked at Zara questioningly. She squeezed his hand. "We wouldn't want to miss it." The final dance was a slower waltz, allowing couples to bid a gentle farewell to the evening. Xavier held Zara closer than propriety strictly allowed, but she couldn't bring herself to care about the speculative glances cast their way. "When can I see you again?" Xavier asked, as the music drew to a close. "Properly, I mean, not just my supply runs to town." "Sunday after church?" Zara suggested. "We could have dinner at the hotel." Xavier nodded, his eyes warm. "I'll be there." He escorted her home, their pace deliberately slow, despite the cold night air. At her door, Xavier kissed her again, this time with a promise that left Zara's knees weak. "Good night, teacher," he said, his voice husky. "Good night, rancher," she replied with a smile. As Xavier rode back to Ironwood that night, the stars seemed brighter, the air fresher, the future more promising than it had in years. He found himself smiling into the darkness, already counting the hours until Sunday. The following weeks established a pattern. Xavier came to town every Sunday, attending church services beside Zara, before sharing dinner at the hotel. Occasionally, weather and ranch obligations permitting, he would ride in midweek as well, bringing small gifts, a book he thought she'd enjoy, honey from a neighbor's hives, wildflowers that grew on his land. Their courtship progressed with a mixture of old-world propriety and frontier practicality. They were always chaperoned in public, mindful of Zara's position as the town's teacher. In private moments, walks along the creek that ran behind the school, quiet conversations on her porch, they spoke of their pasts, their hopes, their growing feelings for each other. As spring bloomed fully across the Wyoming landscape, Xavier invited Zara to visit Ironwood Ranch. "Mrs. Caldwell has been asking about you," he explained, "and I'd like to show you what I've built." The invitation thrilled Zara. Though Xavier had described the ranch in detail, she wanted to see this place that meant so much to him. Arrangements were made for her to ride out with Xavier after school on Friday and return Sunday evening, with Mrs. Turner accompanying them as a proper chaperone. The journey to Ironwood was even more beautiful than Zara remembered. Spring had transformed the landscape she'd first seen in winter's grip. Wildflowers carpeted meadows, cottonwoods shimmered with new leaves along creek beds, and cattle grazed contentedly on lush grass. Approaching the ranch house, Zara was struck by how different it looked in daylight and fair weather. What had seemed merely a haven from the storm now revealed itself as a well-planned, prosperous homestead. The main house was larger than she'd initially realized, with a wide porch wrapping around two sides. Outbuildings were arranged with practical efficiency, and corrals contained horses and cattle. Mrs. Caldwell welcomed Zara like a long-lost relative, embracing her warmly before leading her and Mrs. Turner inside. "You look a sight better than when we first met," she declared approvingly. "Teaching agrees with you." "It does," Zara agreed, "though I think there's more to it than that." Mrs. Caldwell's knowing glance toward Xavier spoke volumes. Indeed, Xavier gave Zara a tour of the ranch while Mrs. Turner rested from the journey. He showed her the barn where new calves were sheltered, the smithy where he forged his own tools, the garden where Mrs. Caldwell grew vegetables and herbs. Everywhere, Zara saw evidence of careful planning and hard work. "You've created something wonderful here," she said, as they paused atop a small rise overlooking the valley. "Something lasting." Xavier's expression was thoughtful. "I hope so. Sometimes I wonder what it's all for: the work, the building. Ranches need heirs to carry on." The implication hung between them, neither ready to speak it aloud, yet both aware of where their courtship was leading. Instead, Xavier took her hand, and they stood in companionable silence, watching the sun begin its descent toward the western mountains. Dinner that evening was a joyous affair. Mrs. Caldwell had prepared a feast, and two of Xavier's ranch hands joined them, entertaining the company with stories of cattle drives and frontier adventures. Zara observed Xavier in this setting, relaxed, occasionally even playful, in a way she rarely saw in town. This was his domain, where he felt most himself. Later, after Mrs. Turner and Mrs. Caldwell had retired, Xavier invited Zara to join him on the porch. A nearly full moon illuminated the landscape, casting silver light over the ranch. "Happy?" Xavier asked, his arm around her shoulders as they sat on the porch swing. "Very," Zara replied, leaning into his warmth. "It's beautiful here, Xavier. I understand why you love it so much." He was quiet for a moment, then spoke hesitantly. "I've been thinking, River End isn't so far. A person could make the ride daily, if necessary." Zara's heart quickened. "What are you saying?" Xavier turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I'm saying that I love you, Zara Mitchell. I've loved you since that night by the fire, though I didn't recognize it then. I'm saying that I want to build a life with you, if you'll have me." Joy surged through Zara, bringing tears to her eyes. "I love you too. So much it frightens me sometimes." "Is that a yes?" Xavier asked, hope and uncertainty mingled in his expression. "Yes," Zara said firmly. "Yes, I'll marry you, Xavier Irwin." His smile was radiant as he gathered her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the emotion words couldn't express. When they finally parted, Xavier reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment," he confessed, emptying the contents into his palm. The ring was simple, but beautiful, a gold band with a small diamond flanked by 2 sapphires. "It was my mother's," Xavier explained. "My father gave it to me before he died, said to save it for the woman who made me want to build something lasting." As he slipped it onto her finger, Zara felt a sense of rightness, of coming home. "It's perfect." They agreed to announce their engagement the following day, first to Mrs. Caldwell and Mrs. Turner, then formally to the town upon their return to River End. The school term would end in June, allowing for a summer wedding. "Will you miss teaching?" Xavier asked as they planned their future. Zara considered the question. "I love it, but I won't miss the constraints. Perhaps I could teach the children on outlying ranches who can't attend the town school regularly." "We could build a small schoolroom at Ironwood," Xavier suggested. "Invite neighboring families to send their children. You'd be teaching on your own terms." The idea appealed to Zara immensely. "I'd like that very much." Morning brought sunshine and the joyful sharing of their news. Mrs. Caldwell wept openly, declaring she'd been praying for this very outcome since the night Xavier had brought a half-frozen Zara to Ironwood. Mrs. Turner offered more restrained congratulations, though her pleasure was evident. The return journey to River End felt different to Zara. No longer was she traveling between 2 separate lives, but rather moving within the boundaries of a shared future. Xavier rode beside her, occasionally reaching across to touch her hand, as if reassuring himself of her presence. News of their engagement spread quickly through River End. Most reactions were positive. Xavier was respected, and Zara had proven herself a dedicated teacher. There were, of course, a few disappointed young men who had harbored hopes of courting the pretty school teacher, and some matrons who sniffed that the courtship had been unusually brief. But overall, the community embraced their union. Judge Porter, in particular, seemed pleased. "I had my suspicions when Xavier brought you to town," he told Zara after Sunday services. "He's never shown such interest in anyone before. You've brought light back to a good man's eyes." The remaining weeks of the school term passed in a blur of preparation. Zara divided her time between teaching, planning the wedding, and visiting Ironwood on weekends to help design the additions to the ranch house that would make it their home. Xavier rode to town whenever possible, sometimes simply to have dinner with her, or to bring supplies for the changes they were making to the teacher's cottage, which would be occupied by Zara's replacement. June arrived with warm days and cool nights. Zara's students presented her with a handmade quilt as a wedding gift, each child having contributed a square. The school committee hired a new teacher, a young widow from Denver with excellent credentials, and Zara spent her final days in the classroom ensuring a smooth transition. The wedding was set for the last Saturday in June. It would be held in Riverend's Church, with a celebration afterward in the town hall. Mrs. Caldwell and Mrs. Turner took charge of the arrangements, allowing Zara to focus on completing her teaching duties. As the day approached, Zara felt a curious mix of emotions, joy, anticipation, and a touch of melancholy for the independent life she was transforming. She expressed this to Xavier during one of their evening walks along the creek. "I want you to know," he said after listening thoughtfully, "that I don't expect you to become just a rancher's wife. Your mind, your spirit, your independence. These are what I love about you. Our marriage should enhance who we are, not diminish either of us." His understanding deepened Zara's conviction that she was making the right choice. This was a partnership in the truest sense, two people choosing to build something together, each bringing their strengths to create something stronger than either could alone. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect. Zara prepared in her cottage, assisted by Mrs. Turner and several of her female students who had begged to help their teacher on her special day. Her dress was cream-colored silk ordered from Denver and altered to fit perfectly. Her hair was arranged with wildflowers rather than a veil, an idea Xavier had suggested to symbolize their frontier beginnings. The small church was filled to capacity. Every resident of Riverend, and many from surrounding homesteads, had come to witness the union of their school teacher and the owner of Ironwood Ranch. Judge Porter stood as Zara's surrogate father, ready to escort her down the aisle. "You look radiant," the judge told her, as they waited for the music to begin. "Xavier is a fortunate man." "We're both fortunate," Zara replied, her heart full. The simple ceremony was perfect in its sincerity. Xavier, standing tall and handsome in a new suit, watched Zara approach with an expression of such love that tears pricked her eyes. Their vows were traditional, but spoken with deep personal meaning, each word a promise for their future together. As the minister pronounced them, husband and wife, Xavier's kiss was tender, yet passionate, a perfect balance of respect and desire that left Zara breathless and the congregation applauding. The celebration afterward was joyous. Tables groaned with food contributed by every family in the community. The musicians from the spring dance provided lively tunes for dancing. Children played games organized by the new teacher, who had arrived the previous week and seemed determined to make a good impression. As evening approached, Xavier led Zara away from the festivities toward where their horses waited, already packed for the journey to Ironwood. They would spend their first night as husband and wife in the ranch house, which had been tactfully vacated by Mrs. Caldwell and the Hands. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Irwin?" Xavier asked, helping her mount. The her new name sent a thrill through Zara. "More than ready, Mr. Irwin." They rode away amid cheers and good wishes. Taking the now familiar trail to Ironwood, the journey passed in comfortable conversation and occasional companionable silence, both aware of the significance of this ride, the first of many they would share as husband and wife. Ironwood was transformed when they arrived. Lanterns hung from the porch, casting a warm glow over the yard. Fresh flowers adorned every room, and a special dinner waited, prepared by Mrs. Caldwell before her departure. The house felt different to Zara, no longer Xavier's home that she was visiting, but their home, ready to embrace their shared life. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Zara rested her head on Xavier's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. His arms around her created a haven of warmth and security she had never known before. "Happy?" Xavier asked, echoing his question from the night of their engagement. "Perfectly," Zara replied, lifting her head to look at him in the moonlight streaming through the window. "And you?" Xavier's smile was tender as he traced her cheek with gentle fingers. "More than I ever thought possible. You've brought light back into my life, Zara. Purpose beyond just existing. As you have to mine," she whispered. "We found each other when we needed it most." "Providence," Xavier murmured, pulling her closer. "Or incredible good fortune." "Both, I think," Zara decided, settling against him. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, pattering on the roof in a soothing rhythm. Within the sturdy walls of Ironwood Ranch, Xavier and Zara Irwin drifted to sleep in each other's arms, secure in their love and the promising future they would build together. In the years that followed, Ironwood Ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Xavier expanded his herds and acquired additional grazing land, while Zara established a small school that served both the ranch hands' children and those from neighboring homesteads. Her reputation as an educator grew, and occasionally she was called to Cheyenne to advise on territorial education matters. Their first child, a daughter named Eleanor after Xavier's mother, arrived a year after their wedding. She was joined 2 years later by a son, James, named for Zara's father. Both children grew strong in the clean Wyoming air, learning ranching from Xavier and academics from Zara, a perfect blend of their parents' strengths. Riverend grew as well, becoming a respectable town with a railroad spur, a proper doctor, and eventually even a small library that Zara helped establish. Xavier served on the town council for several terms, his quiet wisdom respected by all. Through summer heat and winter blizzards, through the challenges of frontier life and the joys of family milestones, Xavier and Zara's partnership deepened. They never forgot that cold night when fate had brought them together, a woman shivering beside a dying fire, a cowboy offering his coat and, ultimately, his heart. On their 20th wedding anniversary, they returned to the spot where they had first met. The landscape had changed somewhat, trees grown taller, the trail more established, but the essence remained the wild beauty that had drawn them both west. "It seems like yesterday," Zara mused as they sat beside a small campfire, intentionally built for remembrance rather than necessity. "And also a lifetime ago." Xavier, his dark hair now threaded with silver, but his eyes still bright with love, wrapped his coat around her shoulders in a deliberate echo of the first night. "Best thing I ever did, finding you out here in the wilderness." "I think we found each other," Zara corrected gently, leaning into his embrace. "And we keep finding each other. Every day." Xavier's kiss was as tender as their first, filled with the depth of love that comes only from years of shared joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. "Every day," he agreed, "for all the days we have." They remained by the fire until the stars emerged, two people who had forged a life together in the vast, beautiful wilderness of Wyoming. Their story, which had begun with cold and desperation, had blossomed into something enduring, a love as strong and resilient as the land that had brought them together.